On a quiet Friday evening in Vallejo, California, 24-year-old Renia Lewis left home and vanished. She was supposed to be gone for only a few minutes. Maybe an errand, maybe a visit, no one knew for sure. The day had been ordinary. Sunlight fading, her mother cooking, neighbors walking dogs. There was nothing unusual about it until Renia didn't come back. Hours passed. Her phone calls went unanswered. Messages showed as delivered, but never read. That wasn't like her. Renia was dependable, the kind of person who responded immediately, even to a short text. By nightfall, unease grew. Her family called her phone again and again, straight to voicemail. They opened Life 360, hoping to see where she'd gone. The app showed her location last pinging somewhere near 14th Street, not far from downtown Vallejo. Then, abruptly, the signal disappeared. At first, they thought it was a glitch. But the next morning, when she still hadn't returned or contacted anyone, the worry turned into fear. Renia's family went to the address shown by Life 360, a quiet residential block, lined with older houses and a few detached rental units. They knocked on doors, asking if anyone had seen her. Nobody had. A few neighbors remembered hearing dogs bark the night before, but nothing else stood out. That same afternoon, they filed a missing person report with the Vallejo Police Department. Officers were dispatched to the area almost immediately. They drove to the 14th Street address, a modest single-story home with overgrown hedges and a faded mailbox. No movement, no response when they knocked. When police gained entry for a welfare check, they found nothing obviously suspicious. The tenant wasn't home. There were no signs of struggle, no personal items belonging to Renia. After searching the surrounding yard, officers logged the visit, marked it clear, and left. But to her family, something about that place felt wrong. As darkness settled over Vallejo again, the house on 14th Street became the center of every conversation. The last known location of a young woman who had simply disappeared. Renia's mother and siblings spent the night driving the same routes over and over. They checked hospitals, parking lots, and side streets. They posted her picture online, begging anyone with information to reach out. Local community pages began sharing her photo. Bright smile, soft curls, gold necklace visible against her collar. By Saturday morning, nearly 24 hours after she vanished, no one had heard from her. Not one digital trace, no calls, no social media posts, nothing. That afternoon, the family went back to the police, urging them to look deeper. This wasn't a case of someone running off. They explained who she was, her steady routine, her job, her church, her reliability. She didn't just disappear. The case was upgraded from missing adult to active search, and investigators began retracing her last known movements. Detectives pulled nearby CCTV footage and began interviewing residents along the 14th Street block. Most cameras were motion activated, and none showed Renia after the time her phone's GPS cut off. Meanwhile, the family began piecing together her last known communications. Her final text, sent that Friday afternoon, was brief. "I'll be back soon." That was it. As hours turned to days, Vallejo's tight-knit community started mobilizing. Flyers went up at gas stations and corner stores. Friends organized searches near the creek that ran parallel to the 14th Street area. By Sunday evening, her case had drawn the attention of local news outlets. The story spread fast. 24-year-old woman missing after leaving home in Vallejo. Behind the scenes, detectives worked quietly. They knew the window of finding someone alive was narrowing by the hour. Still, without a vehicle, witnesses, or digital trail, the case was already becoming difficult. On Monday, they revisited the same house where her phone had last pinged, the one on 14th Street. A different team conducted a more thorough look this time, inspecting the exterior, garage, and surrounding property. Again, nothing stood out. The tenant was still not home. But something didn't add up. The signal from Renia's phone had been too precise to be random. It wasn't a general area ping, it was a fixed location, within a few feet. Someone or something had caused that signal to stop there. As daylight faded, Renia's mother stood across the street from that same house, watching it. Porch light flickering, blinds half drawn. A quiet structure in a quiet neighborhood. She whispered softly, as if her daughter might somehow hear her. "Renia, if you're near, just give us a sign." The street remained still. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees. By nightfall, it was official. Renia Lewis had disappeared without a trace. You're watching Trace of Evil, where we reveal true crimes, unsolved disappearances, and mysteries surrounding crime. Like and subscribe to watch more episodes from our channel. Let's get back into the story of Renia Lewis. By Saturday morning, September 21st, the disappearance of Renia Lewis was no longer a family concern. It had become a city-wide search. At 9:45 a.m., Vallejo police officially listed her as a missing person. Detectives from the Investigations Division were assigned. Flyers with her image, smiling, wearing a light gray sweatshirt and gold chain, began circulating across social media. By noon, her case reached local television. Reporters used the same footage her mother had sent. Home videos, laughter in the background, a short clip of Renia cooking in the kitchen. The contrast between the brightness of her life and the silence now surrounding her made the story spread fast. That same day, detectives analyzed cell tower data from her phone provider. The signal showed a consistent location trail from her home to East 14th Street, stopping at 5:57 p.m. on Friday, September 20th. There were no further pings, not a single move, text, or call afterward. Her bank account showed no new transactions, no debit card activity, no Uber rides. Her social media logins ended around 6 p.m. that same day. To investigators, this wasn't voluntary. Someone or something had made her vanish completely from digital space. By Sunday morning, September 22nd, Vallejo police issued an Ebony Alert, California's emergency notice system for missing Black youth and women. It marked the case as high-risk disappearance. The alert went out at 10:42 a.m. At 11:30 a.m., officers and volunteers began canvassing the 14th Street area. 9 units were brought in, searching alleyways, backyards, and trash bins. The dogs picked up a scent near the rear fence of a property, 735 East 14th Street, before losing it near a side gate. That same property had been checked once before during the initial welfare visit. The tenant, a man named Douglas Irwin Shaw, was still not present. His name came up in utility records and prior police logs, mostly minor issues, noise complaints, unregistered vehicles. Nothing stood out as violent. By Sunday evening, detectives obtained security footage from a nearby convenience store camera facing the street. At 5:44 p.m. on Friday, a dark sedan, believed to be Renia's, drove past heading east. At 5:52 p.m., a figure matching her build walked along the sidewalk near 735 East 14th, wearing what appeared to be the same sweatshirt from her photos. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. At 6:05 p.m., a second figure, taller, wearing dark clothing, was seen crossing from the opposite side of the street toward that same address. The footage was grainy, the identity unclear. By Monday, September 23rd, police returned to the property with a warrant for a secondary search. Forensic teams and detectives entered the premises around 2 p.m. The front yard was cluttered. Broken furniture, a blue tarp, tools scattered. Inside, the main house appeared clean but oddly sparse. One detached garage had been converted into a rental unit, Shaw's living space. Detectives cataloged everything. One flashlight with drained batteries, work boots with traces of what appeared to be dried mud, a set of car keys not matching Shaw's registered vehicle, a roll of industrial-grade duct tape inside a utility cabinet. Forensics collected each item. No direct evidence tied them to Renia, but the location's alignment with her last GPS ping deepened suspicion. At 6:30 p.m., while the search continued, detectives requested access to nearby cell tower logs. They discovered that another device, registered to Douglas Shaw, had been active in the same 30-meter radius as Renia's phone at 5:58 p.m. Friday, precisely when her phone's signal cut off. That data point changed everything. By Tuesday, September 24th, the FBI joined the case, offering digital forensics and behavioral profiling support. Agents began reconstructing a timeline minute by minute from Renia's last known movements. They confirmed that after her phone went silent, Shaw's phone stayed on the grid until 10:12 p.m. before going dark for the next 36 hours. That blackout period matched the time window investigators believed Renia disappeared. As news spread, residents of 14th Street grew uneasy. Some recalled seeing Shaw outside late Friday night, pacing with a flashlight. One neighbor, a retired mechanic, told detectives, "He kept looking up at the house like something was up there." That detail caught the team's attention, the reference to up there. The attic space in Shaw's unit hadn't been inspected fully during the first search. At 3:15 p.m. on Tuesday, lead investigator Detective Carla Mendez made a decision. They'd go back with a full forensic warrant. The order was approved by 5 p.m. As officers prepared for the return search, Renia's family stood outside the police station, holding signs and photos, pleading for the public to help. They didn't know it yet, but they were hours away from an answer, one that would end the search but break their hearts completely. By Tuesday evening, September 24th, the Vallejo Police Department had a warrant in hand for a second, comprehensive search of 735 East 14th Street, the property tied to the final GPS signal from Renia Lewis's phone. At 6:12 p.m., four detectives and 2 forensic technicians entered the main house, led by Detective Carla Mendez. Officers secured the perimeter, while the forensics unit methodically photographed every section of the property. The tenant, Douglas Irwin Shaw, 41, was not on site at the time. His last known location, according to employer logs, was his workplace, the maintenance department at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, roughly 20 minutes away. Inside the property, everything appeared deceptively calm. The main room smelled faintly of bleach. Trash bins were empty, surfaces wiped, but the longer they looked, the stranger the layout felt. At 7:04 p.m., Detective Mendez compared the blueprint of the home, obtained from the city's housing registry, against what they were seeing in real time. One measurement didn't align. The house plans showed an additional 12-foot crawl space above the rear bedroom, yet there was no visible attic hatch or ladder access. She called for a stepladder. The team inspected the ceiling and found a section where the paint seemed fresher than the surrounding surface. Knocking on it produced a dull, hollow sound. By 7:26 p.m., officers began cutting into the drywall. The air that escaped was stale, unmoving for days. Behind the layer of insulation was a hidden cavity, roughly 4 feet high, extending toward the roofline. A flashlight beam caught something immediately. A sheet of fabric, pale in color, lying flat against the wooden beams. As Detective Mendez climbed closer, she noticed strands of hair tangled in the fabric. Her expression froze. She didn't speak. Instead, she called for the forensic team to step in. When the first technician entered the crawl space, the reality became undeniable. At 7:41 p.m., investigators discovered a female body, partially concealed beneath insulation material. The team withdrew instantly, securing the scene and contacting the coroner. The area was sealed under evidence tape. Within 30 minutes, the command staff arrived on site. The atmosphere was heavy, clinical, and silent. By 8:22 p.m., the coroner's preliminary report confirmed the victim was consistent with the description of 24-year-old Renia Lewis, pending DNA confirmation. Detectives began reconstructing the immediate timeline. The concealment appeared deliberate. The hidden cavity had been constructed recently, screws still shiny, insulation newly cut. Whoever placed her there had knowledge of the structure and enough time to cover their actions before the initial welfare check days earlier. Outside, police units began canvassing the neighborhood again. One resident, whose yard shared a fence with the property, told officers he'd seen Shaw outside around midnight Friday, moving a ladder from his garage toward the back of the house. He assumed it was maintenance work. At 9:05 p.m., an arrest warrant for Douglas Shaw was issued. Officers coordinated with the security team at Six Flags, where he was scheduled for an overnight shift beginning at 10 p.m. At 9:47 p.m., plainclothes detectives arrived at the park. Shaw was located in a maintenance corridor near the staff break area, holding a coffee thermos, appearing calm. When confronted, He showed mild confusion before being handcuffed without resistance. He was read his rights on site, then transported to the Solano County Jail for questioning. During interrogation, Shaw offered minimal responses. He denied knowing Renia, then changed his statement, claiming she might have come by once. He avoided eye contact, requested an attorney, and refused further questions. By Wednesday morning, September 25th, Vallejo police held a press briefing confirming that a female body was discovered at the 14th Street residence and that a suspect was in custody. They did not release the victim's name publicly pending autopsy confirmation, but sources close to the family already knew. At 11:15 a.m., detectives finished processing the attic space. Evidence technicians documented several key findings. Zip ties partially buried beneath insulation. A torn sweatshirt sleeve matches Renia's last known clothing. 2 empty energy drink cans are consistent with Shaw's brand preference at work. A handwritten note fragment with partial text, "Don't make noise." The coroner's office began the autopsy at 1:30 p.m., confirming the cause of death as asphyxiation. The estimated time of death aligned with Friday, September 20th, between 6:30 p.m. and 8 p.m. With that confirmation, the missing person case officially became a homicide investigation. News broke citywide by the afternoon. Reporters gathered outside the Vallejo Police Department, cameras flashing, microphones raised. Detectives remained inside, exhausted but methodical. Every movement in the evidence room was logged. Every photo is time-stamped. Behind closed doors, investigators quietly acknowledged the truth. Renia Lewis had never left that property alive. By Wednesday evening, police sealed off the residence fully for extended forensic analysis. The community stood outside behind barricades, whispering, crying, filming. The search had ended. The story was only beginning to unfold. October 1st, 2025. The morning after the discovery, Vallejo woke to headlines that felt like a punch to the chest. Missing woman found dead in attic. Suspect arrested. The news spread across every major outlet within hours. For most, the story was incomprehensible. How a woman could go missing on a Friday and be found murdered in the same neighborhood just 4 days later. For Renia's family, it was an unbearable confirmation of their worst fear. At the Vallejo Police Department, the tone was heavy. Detectives were still processing evidence, and the coroner's office confirmed that the cause of death was consistent with blunt force trauma. Preliminary results suggested Renia had been killed the same night she disappeared, Friday, September 26, 2025. By midday, October 1st, Douglas Irwin Shaw appeared briefly in Solano County Superior Court, charged with 1 count of murder. He entered no plea. Wearing a faded gray jumpsuit and showing little emotion, he stood silently as prosecutors requested that he be held without bail. The courtroom was filled with reporters, family members, and residents who had followed the case since the alert was issued. Outside the courthouse, Renia's mother, Tasha Lewis, addressed the press for the first time. Her voice was steady but hollow. "My daughter didn't deserve this. She trusted people. She was kind to everyone. And now she's gone because someone decided her life didn't matter." Her words echoed through every news cycle that evening. October 2nd, 2025. By Thursday, community outrage had grown. Hundreds gathered for a vigil on the steps of City Hall, holding candles and demanding justice. Activist groups called out the delays in the initial police search, questioning how Renia's body could have been missed in a home visited days earlier. Social media amplified the sentiment. The hashtag Justice for Renia trended across California. Local news outlets aired interviews with residents who criticized law enforcement's handling of the case, arguing that if the search had been more thorough on September 28th, she might have been found sooner. Police Chief Shauna Thompson addressed those criticisms publicly, saying, "This case has shaken every one of us. We did not fail Renia intentionally. The search we conducted that night followed procedure, but we will review every step to make sure this never happens again." Still, the damage was done. To many, it wasn't enough. October 3rd, 2025. The case caught state-level attention. Lawmakers cited Renia's murder as another reminder of the vulnerability of missing women cases. especially among women of color, whose disappearances often draw delayed response. Civil rights advocates called for policy reform, urging the expansion of California's Ebony Alert system to cover broader scenarios beyond traditional criteria. On the same day, Vallejo's mayor announced a community oversight task force to examine the police department's investigation timeline and internal procedures. Reporters covering the case noted how quickly it evolved from a local tragedy into a state conversation about systemic failure. Meanwhile, at the crime lab in Solano County, forensic analysts continued to process the evidence collected from the 14th Street residence. Among the items submitted were Renia's phone, recovered earlier from a school roof, several strands of hair found inside the attic insulation, and traces of DNA belonging to both Renia and Douglas Shaw. The evidence, investigators said, was overwhelming. October 4, 2025. Renia's funeral was held at St. Paul Baptist Church, attended by more than 300 people. The ceremony was filled with tributes, friends describing her warmth, family recalling her laughter, and strangers who had followed her case expressing solidarity. Her casket, white and adorned with pink lilies, became a symbol of everything stolen by senseless violence. That afternoon, outside the church, protesters lined the street with placards reading, "No more delays. No more excuses." Others wore shirts bearing her face and the words, "Remember her name." As the sun set, her mother released a single balloon into the sky, a quiet gesture that stood in contrast to the noise of the crowd. October 5, 2025. Douglas Shaw remained in custody, awaiting a formal arraignment. According to reports from within the facility, he had requested isolation due to threats from other inmates. Prosecutors were preparing for trial, describing the case as strong and airtight. They confirmed they would seek the maximum sentence under California law. By then, the story had crossed national lines. Major outlets like People, CBS News, and NBC Bay Area ran extended coverage. Each headline carried the same haunting subtext. How could something this horrific happen in plain sight? The aftermath of Renia's death left Vallejo in collective grief. Street murals began appearing within days, her smile painted on walls across downtown. Local shops displayed her name on windows. Strangers left candles near 14th Street every night. In 4 days, Renia Lewis went from missing to murdered to a movement, a painful reminder of how fast innocence can turn into outrage. October 6, 2025. A week after she vanished, Vallejo remained unsettled. The crime scene had been cleared, but the scars it left were fresh. A quiet neighborhood had become a monument to unanswered questions. Not about who killed her, but about why so many others had to fight this hard for her to be found.